Welcome to the Riverwinter map tier list, covering each map in the game and ranking them from S to F tier. But before we go into the maps, let's go over the criteria on how I'm going to rank them. First of note, these categories can be ranked in this order: poor, decent, good, and excellent. Aesthetics: how a map visually looks and the spectacle it can provide for viewers. Maps with large diverse landscapes, battles, and skirmishes will be ranked higher. Gameplay: how a map plays, considering pacing, player agency, quests, replayability, and balance between exploration and combat. Aesthetics and gameplay are the prime two categories taken into consideration of the tier list. However, I do have a few more I wish to include, but are not considered for the map tier mainly because of their highly subjective nature, the lack of progression, or their inconsistency. Difficulty: how hard a map is, ranked from easy, medium, hard, and gimmick, with gimmick meaning something that is not necessarily difficult, but requires changing gameplay patterns. It is not part of the tier list due to its subjectiveness. Loot: the density and quality of loot on a map, along with how easy it is to get, and will be discussed on a map-by-map basis as opposed to a condensed rank. It is not factored into tier list due to the lack of progression. Performance: how a map performs and is only based in relation to my system. For example, if my baseline is 60 plus FPS for most maps, maps that perform worse than that will be noted here. Variance: the type of variance the map has and is not part of the rankings due to their random nature. Lastly, we have the overall tiers for the maps, starting at S tier being the best, going down to F tier being the worst. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into our first map, Ashen Mesa. Ashen Mesa is a large expansive battleground surrounded by a few diverse points of interest, such as the Destroyed Titan, a large network of bunkers, and lastly Shantytown, a myriad of towering shanties looking over the plains below and its many battles. Along with this, it has numerous additional out-of-bounds ambiance pieces, such as skyscrapers off-map, a chasm of destroyed buildings spanned by a giant claw bridge, and topped off with distant hills and a city skyline. Altogether, the map does an amazing job in the aesthetic field, providing a great contrast of landscapes, set pieces, and providing a large area in which to view the battles between the factions. On the gameplay front, Ashen Mesa is home to a great deal of quests, along with hosting most enemy types in the game for the more generic ones. This is the primary driver of how the map plays, often nudging players out of their comfort zone and forcing them into dynamic situations as they try and complete these quests. Additionally, the map houses a fair bit of exploration between the Titan, Bunker, and Shantytown, each having a bit more than meets the eye, such as vertical elements that reward climbing. On pacing, agency, and replayability, the map suffers a bit, as while high in quality, the few points of interest create only so many variations, rewarding players for taking similar routes between. Additionally, the map itself has a pacing issue, having either incredibly aggressive respawns or non-existent ones, with this typically being the case for the entire raid. Difficulty-wise, this map has gotten a lot harder since the AI touch-ups in March, mainly due to the Eurasian chopper. On top of this, hunter-killers on the map, along with its poor cover, mean moving between points of interest can be deceptively deadly. I would consider this to be one of the harder maps in the game. Ashen Mesa has a fairly unique structure with its loot, that being primarily focused around three areas: Shantytown, Bunker, and the Extract over Chain Bridge. Together, they add up to quite a lot of loot, but pale in comparison to some of the denser maps, especially when speed is taken into consideration. With a few recent patches, Ashen Mesa has had consistently good performance, and I have no issues with staying above 60 FPS on it. The map has one variant, that being its nighttime variant of Eclipse. The map's ambiance skyrockets with a different musical score, lighting, and playstyle, with it focusing more on stealth and avoiding the ire of units such as mothers and grabbers. However, the player's inability to know they are heading into this variant can create tension, as the lack of a silencer is incredibly punishing. Altogether, Ashen Mesa combines excellent aesthetics between its landscapes, set pieces, and battles, while also providing interesting gameplay with its few but thorough points of interest. I consider this an A-tier map. Sprawling trench lines, fortifications, and graveyards of mechs brings us to Elephant Mausoleum, a map with a strong aesthetic in the grimdark trench vibe. Embracing this aspect takes you on a highly tailored journey, full of set pieces such as giant artillery pieces, burning pyres of bodies, and bunkers. In comparison to Ashen Mesa, where the central battle is removed from the skirmishes and side conflicts, this map is the best effort thus far of an entire battle raging across its width, despite this merely being an illusion for now. Additionally, the areas outside of the map do a great job like that of Ashen Mesa, making the player feel small and insignificant in a very large world. Gameplay-wise, the map's linear nature works for it and against it, with its highly tailored aspect providing good pacing that works in tandem with the quests. However, it also directly hurts player agency and its replayability, with no thought need to be given about how to get to a location or what to do when there. Additionally, the quests all typically take you into a small area of the map, reinforcing this notion of monotony. One other aspect lacking in the map is exploration, with the trenches being fairly mundane and the map lacking any real verticality. Exploration isn't discouraged, it's not even possible. However, despite all of these considerations, the map's gameplay is still quite serviceable, with a great deal of care taken to having numerous skirmishes between enemies that don't end up arbitrarily punishing the player. The difficulty of Elephant Mausoleum is pretty straightforward, trenches full of infantry. It does break this in a few areas, such as exos, grabbers, and medium mechs, but generally these are avoidable. The CQB nature of its trench lines also provides a great deal of cover while moving through the map, a blessing in comparison to sprinting through Ashen Mesa. The loot on Mausoleum is mostly centralized in the central bunker area, with plentiful rooms of containers, mostly containing meds. Additionally, the outer trench lines are a great spot for large items. Essentially, while it's not the best map for looting, with its quests, it can make for some very profitable raids. Performance-wise, Elephant Mausoleum is one of the poorer performing maps in the game, often dipping by 20 to 30% in certain areas, though it's gotten better each patch and is not the worst map in this regard. The variant of Elephant Mausoleum is its Night Shift, that being a night version of the map in which mothers, grabbers, and cyborgs wander the trenches and battlefields of the map. It is the darkest map in the game and is quite immersive, in no HUD mode, and it can be quite hard to see at times. Much like Eclipse, the inability to control when you play this map's variant can make it troublesome at times. Elephant Mausoleum is a great map let down by its repetitive gameplay, something that's amenable with time, expansions, and variants. Ultimately, its strong aesthetics and tailored nature land it solidly in B tier. Frozen Swamp hosts one of the only maps leaning heavily into the industrial aesthetic, with its massive injector site and off-map smokestacks. Additionally, it is the only map with a forest, their dead and decaying trees now repurposed as a home to Euruscan drones. Breaking up the map and preventing visual clutter are sporadic ponds of polluted water providing clear sightlines to distant battles. Lastly, like previous maps thus far, a great deal of care is taken into populating the out-of-bounds areas, with distant forests, polluted lakes, large industrial walls, and weaving pipes connecting the main industrial buildings. For gameplay, Frozen Swamp is the best map thus far for pacing the player, providing tense situations around looting areas, and providing respite and exploration outside of them. Its size, along with the polluted lakes, work as a way to organically funnel players along certain paths and also include a degree of verticality with the many pipes. Both of these work together to provide unparalleled amounts of agency to the player in how they move about the map, along with creating clear choke points and conflict areas for tailored experiences. This, along with the map's many quests, make it a fairly replayable map, as different loadouts of quests and spawn points create a variety of possible routes through the swamp. Lastly, these paths promote exploration on the map, as you learn all the alternate routes between the locations and their pros and cons. For difficulty, it is one of the harder maps but does it in a fair way. Unlike Ashen Mesa, choppers are very rare here and are typically only found in the corners of the map. Additionally, wall grabbers can also be deployed here. Once knowledge is gained about their spawns, they are easily avoided. Lastly, the plentiful ways of breaking line of sight provide easy ways of breaking contact with enemies along with HKs, though a few areas like the injector site itself can be quite troublesome. Loot-wise, Frozen Swamp provides a clear, high-risk area containing much of the loot of the map, that being the injector site. Outside of this one area, loot is much harder to come by, though can still be found in fair quantities in Shantytown and around the Titans and railways. Additionally, this is one of the first maps to heavily utilize the drill mechanic, locking loot containers behind an obstacle. Performance-wise, considering the sheer size of this map, it runs quite well, staying above the 60 FPS mark, and I have yet to have any issues with stuttering on it. For variance, Frozen Swamp has one night shift, a version of the map illuminated by a green glow of polluted ash and bonfires upon the effigies. Much like the other night shifts discussed thus far, it primarily focuses on special units like Mothers and Grabbers, supported by cyborg swarms, and once again heavily punishes the use of unsilenced weapons. Altogether, this makes Frozen Swamp visually excellent and hosts the most compelling gameplay for me, providing large amounts of agency in choosing how I navigate through the map, without being constantly overwhelmed with combat or bored by nothingness. This lands Frozen Swamp in S tier. Trenches stretching deep into the earth, metallic walls spanning their height, walkways, pipes, and wires spanning their width. Mech Trenches, while sharing a similar theme to many maps, takes this concept to the extreme. A map of interconnected trenches acting as a roadway between the world. Between them, built into the walls themselves, facilities to keep the wheels of war turning. While the spectacle this map produces at first is fantastic, it quickly loses its splendor as the map lacks any contrast. Additionally, the skirmishes here between enemies are few and quite rare, with only one small area of the map consistently having a battle taking place, which is difficult to be a passive viewer of. Regarding gameplay, Mech Trench feels a fair bit mundane, as while its pacing is rather good, the map suffers quite a lot from its structure, really only containing one massive central point of interest. This hurts it in several ways, being its replayability, or the quests it could support, and severely restricts the agency a player can have on the map. One of the points I'm most sour about is the vast degree of vertical space on the map that isn't utilized, feeling like a wasted opportunity mocking you every time you play the map. That being said, the pacing of the map really does excel here, and the CQB combat is fairly enjoyable, redeeming much of the map's gameplay shortcomings. For seasoned players, the difficulty of this map is quite easy, as the plentiful cover and the inability to get the upper echelons of hunter-killers makes enemies very manageable. The most difficult element of the map is the occasional surprise exo that can find its ways indoors, though is easily avoided. Looting is very good on Mech Trenches, with its small size and simple layout, putting it easily in contention for the best looting map, especially considering its relative size in comparison to others. Loot here is both plentiful and densely packed, especially in the one storage room. Mech Trench's performance is quite good relative to other maps. Its small nature, along with its limited spawns, active NPCs, and sightlines break the map into very small, manageable chunks. Lastly, regarding variance, it is one of the few maps currently without a night shift, and is likely due to the lack of your open night shift units. Between its aesthetics and gameplay, Mech Trenches is our first real indication of some real flaws popping up, along with a lot being left on the table. Though, the map's fantastic pacing, along with interesting aesthetics, even if underutilized, still provide a solid experience, placing this map into C tier. Scrapyard Nexus only has a limited amount of space to work with for its aesthetic, it being essentially one long corridor, Despite this, the map still does a fair job between its numerous catwalks, statues, and murals. Additionally, while we are not yet in the variant section, this is the only map in the game with 2 daytime variants, providing the map with some visual longevity. However, much like our previous map, Mech Trench, the structure of Scrapyard limits its possibilities, with the player's location deep within the trench hindering events that can be happening above or around it, though the set piece of the large building and the occasional cyborg bomber does help. Regarding gameplay, Scrapyard offers something no other map really does yet, a get in and get out raid style. As for every other map, you enter from one side and leave out the other. Meanwhile, Scrapyard, your entrance is the same as the exit, and the fight getting in is merely a precursor for the one getting out. The map's layout also does a good job with limited space, providing a few differing paths to journey deeper into the map. Additionally, the map removes the hunter-killer mechanic, untethering players, allowing them to go for a truly guns-blazing approach in contrast to more stealth-oriented gameplay on the other maps. And because of it, it's a great outlet for players who want to test guns without drawing the ire of the hunters. Though make no mistake, this map offers plenty of challenges with its aggressive respawns. On this note, Scrapyard can be a fairly difficult map, as it really pushes players toward combat with optional stealth, a reversal of other maps. As noted, the aggressive respawns and locations from which they can reinforce from are very easy to be caught off guard from, and so while manageable, I would consider this a hard map. From a loot perspective, the map is decent, but rather limited, with deeper runs into Scrapyard offering several loot areas, the downsides being their proximity to spawns and patrol paths. Moving to performance, the map size does it a ton of favors, and it runs quite well, being the best or one of the best performing maps in the game currently. Scrapyard is unique when it comes to variants, offering 3 as opposed to the normal 2. These being what I would call the daytime or clean variant, an evening or orange variant, and lastly the night variant. The clean variant offers primarily gameplay against the Eurasia and Eruska factions, with Europa nowhere to be found. The orange variant, however, has Europa present on the map with the other factions, and turns the map into a chaotic battleground. Lastly, the night shift functions much the same as the others, and can have a patrolling grabber. In most scenarios, Scrapyard would probably be considered a poor or even bad map. However, its contrast to how all other maps play, along with its numerous variants, breathe a fair amount of life into it, landing it solidly in C tier. Scorched Enclave, a small map with a big atmosphere, utilizing the surrounding landscapes and its bowl-like structure to provide unhindered visibility. Because of this, almost everything taking place on the map is visible, and provides a great sense of scale for making scavengers feel small. While the battles on this map take place around the central fortifications, there is still a good amount of diversity, though rarely used by scavs. For example, the plains under the Titans host European reinforcements and the occasional bout between the factions' mechs, and much like Ashen Mesa, allows for ambient combat to fill the soundscapes and visuals of the map. The aesthetics section flows into the gameplay of the map, the open terrain of the outer edges funneling you into the more chaotic but cover-laden fortifications. Despite this ultimately being one point of interest, it is expansive enough where the core premise of the map becomes choosing how you navigate it. It is in this where the map shines, offering plenty of possibilities on how you choose to navigate it, and creates a good deal of replayability and lets you pace yourself as you see fit. Some of the weak points, though, are primarily due to this one central location, that being the map's lack of exploration and its limited quests. Scorched Enclave can be a bit of a mixed bag in regards to difficulty, as it can be quite deadly, especially now with the chopper changes. However, the plentiful cover, small size, and many enemies provide plenty of options for players to utilize, such as beelining to the extract, or letting an enemy squad draw the ire of their counterparts for you. For loot, this might be Scorched Enclave's biggest boon, that being a lot of it and centrally located in a small map. While this may not always be the case, quick runs to the locked bunker on Scorched Enclave can result in easy profits for those who need money fast. Scorched Enclave's performance is in a way a benchmark for the game, being big enough to not be a shoe-in like Scrapyard, but small enough to not have impacts based on its sheer size like Masoluem. In full combat scenarios, the map performs well, keeping above the 60 FPS mark. Lastly, the map has one night shift, that being a graveyard hosting plentiful cyborgs, mothers, and grabbers. And for players adverse to these night shifts, the quick and easy sprint to the exit makes this map even more ideal. In summary, Scorched Enclave truly encompasses what the game wants to do, offering a stealth-focused, combat-optional journey with set pieces and battles in a small compact form. While I personally would like more exploration in my maps, I have no problems with Scorched Enclave being the benchmark for small maps into the future, landing it in A tier. If one thing can be said about Stairway Gate is that it is certainly a vibe, a blend of red hellish light and a stairway ascending to the heavens, covered with craters and oozing structures, the lighting making them appear as if they're bleeding. As you ascend or descend this staircase, you're treated with numerous statues, set pieces, and adjacent buildings that, while do a great job of making the player feel small, ring ever so hollow, as while the grand structures of the map are awe-inspiring, under closer inspection, details are lacking, ultimately making the map feel superficial. Lastly, the map is broken up visually into several segments that offer little to no reprieve from the combat at hand, limiting the player's ability to engage in spectating battles. Stairway has quite a few glaring issues in regards to gameplay, and in a way it feels like a fundamentally flawed map. The primary cause of this is due to the layout and the lack of agency it promotes, and it's going to sound weird, but the map is literally just going up and down a staircase. A big one. And you might be thinking, well duh, it's a map called Stairway Gate. But let me say this again. The only thing to do on the map is to go up or down the staircase. There are no choices to be made, almost no places to find a pacing reprieve from, and almost no exploration. This is a map where you play it once, you have played it every time, at least currently. At its core, it really emphasizes style over substance, to such an extreme that there's nothing to do. Difficulty-wise, the map is about middle of the road, though this can easily be bumped up to hard if the chopper patrol path gets fixed. For looting, the map is quite poor, with containers being scattered about the map, along with large items. The only saving grace being a large locked container at the top of the map that contains a spawn for many large items, but requires a drill. As the newest map, it has a few glaring performance issues, primarily around the top areas of the staircase where FPS drops are common and get down to a slow crawl. Other than that, the map runs fine and its issues with performance are likely bugs and not baked into the map itself. Stairway Gate currently has no variants, but in a way, the current rendition of the map feels akin to Eclipse Ashen Mesa, and perhaps we may see this red version of the map take up a role similar to that in the future. In summary, Stairway Gate feels like a map that was designed as an art piece first and a game piece later, and perhaps these issues I've raised came up in testing or design, but were tossed aside because of the artistic integrity of the map, and that's fair. It's okay to have a map like this in the game, something meant to be unique among its peers. However, it is not a map I enjoy, and it's not something I would like to see them do again in the future, and thus this map lands in F tier. Underground Cemetery does a good job with the limited space it has, focusing more on attention to detail than sheer volume. In a way, the map's core premise is that it tells a story. First being the veins of a city, the sewers that run underneath, then of survivors taking refuge and finding a home here, and later death, turning this one refuge into a mass burial site. Signs of all of these can be found across the map, from the old machinery lighting the hallways, to the murals upon the walls, and lastly the bodies and skeletons littering the area. Outside of this, the map size is detrimental. offering little diversity in its aesthetic and almost no areas to become a spectator of battles. Though regardless of this limitation, it's hard to take in anything when you're under the duress of the Guardian of the Deep, the Grabber. Gameplay-wise, Underground Cemetery transports players into a pure stealth game, with the ever-looming presence of the Grabber, a creature capable of one-shotting scavengers. In a way, the map tries to feel like a horror game of playing cat and mouse with this creature, but with none of the mechanical elements of stealth games or their fundamental systems. The Grabber essentially dictates the pace and is the primary driver of the choices you make, which in theory should promote dynamic, meaningful agency for the player, forcing them to make life or death choices. However, the AI of the Grabber is currently not up to the task, and so the map more becomes learning the right choices and motions rather than making them, with this hurting the map's replayability. Lastly, the map size is just too small, hindering its replayability in quests, with really only the central room being of any consequence. For difficulty, the map ultimately ends up feeling like a gimmick, something that isn't trying to be actually difficult, but just forcing you to go through the appropriate hoops in the right order, and while it can be fun to do this occasionally, once you learn the motions, it's not difficult. Cemetery isn't all that bad of a map for loot if you're willing to or wanting to go through its gimmick. The central room and adjacent connectors are fairly flush with containers and loose items, making them a very profitable run once you learn the ins and outs of the Grabber, but there are better options. For performance, the map runs well, but considering its size, that's to be expected. Cemetery also has one variant, a night shift in a way. In the place of Etruscan soldiers, cultists are deployed instead in a darker atmospheric setting. However, the Grabber still persists on this night shift, and so it essentially plays the same. In conclusion, Underground Cemetery is really just a gimmick map, forcing the players to abide by a certain set of rules or suffer harsh consequences, and sometimes that can be enjoyable. A change in pacing, a slight genre shift, though I can't help but feel a lot of potential is left out of such a map, especially being our only underground one thus far, and I really can't see myself putting it any higher than D tier. So there we have it, the March patch edition of the Forever Winter map tier list. All in all, I would say I'm overall satisfied with the vast majority of the maps, but I would like to use this closing section to highlight one issue I hope gets addressed: gameplay depth. What I mean by this is I do not merely want a theme park ride through the post-apocalypse, taking pictures along the way, a Forever Winter snap, if you will. I want maps that ask questions of the players as they're playing them, and while the golden bar would be making the players' answers to these questions impactful, I would easily settle for those questions being asked in the first place. There is no choice when it comes to maps like Stairway Gate that force you along its only path. There is no choice on Mech Trench when almost everything is located in that one point of interest. There is no choice when the Grabber forces you to play Cemetery in a certain way or die. If the developers are afraid of the bar of making choices feel impactful, I would first start with asking the question. That's all for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the maps down below in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take it easy, and I'll see you next time.